All right, welcome everybody. Two topics on the agenda so far, both from Yuval relating to ongoing work on topics. Yuval, would you introduce these?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so I would like to start with the second one, just because I think it's going to be simpler. So the second topic is regarding the authorization of users with topics. So there is a tracker and a PR that will open to make sure that the only the user that created the topic can modify it or override it. Like there's no modify command. There's only a create, but if you want to modify it, you just call another create with the same topic. So the reason that it was an issue because different users kind of overridden one another's topic, and there was no checking against that. Now, in Squid, I think that Kernel added like policies to topics that would allow you to decide exactly who and what other users can do to the topics that you created. And the reason, that this is going to work. So when Kernel added this feature, we also created like a global configuration parameter that when there's no policy, we don't check the feature. We don't check the policy at all. So then the reason that we did that is because we wanted to maintain backward compatibility. Now the issue is that I mean, what the user wanted is some kind of a protection mechanism, and we're disabling the protection mechanism by default. So if somebody is setting a policy, then we honor the policy regardless of the global flag. Like if somebody configured the policy, it means that they want us to do the actual authorization. But if somebody didn't set the policy, then instead of saying like the default policy is that only the owner of the topic can do anything with the topic, we kind of fall back to a default where anyone can do anything with the topic. So that's the problem. My suggestion is not to break backward compatibility, because that would be a very nasty surprise for many users. And I guess we should add some kind of documentation saying that if you want to have to prevent those situations, and if you want to have authorization, you should set the policy. Now, if you set the policy, then everything would work fine. If your system is a new system that doesn't have any pre-Squid topics configured in it, that doesn't have the user information, or and you know that in your system you want to require all topic creators to create topics with policies, with proper policies, then you can set the flag to true. But I would really think that we should keep the flag at false by default because of those reasons.
So, I mean, right, I think this tracker issue is a serious bug report, essentially saying that any user can just overwrite the topic of any other user by default. And I do think that that's the wrong behavior. It's great that we have topic policy, but they should default to no permissions on other users' topics, and policy should be able to grant access instead of the other way around.
So this has two issues. One of them is the fact that before Squid, we didn't even have the user information in the
Right.
topic. So there's no way to actually enforce that. And even if we do have this, so let's say that somebody has a system, and in their system there's no topic policy whatsoever. Even if there is the user information there, their system is already built and working in a way that may allow other users to touch other users' topics. And if we make this change, we're going to break the system.
But Yuval, we had the same discussion the last time as well. I understand. So we are trying to let people use the wrong thing which they are accustomed to using, right? If we look at AWS as well, the documents clearly says like, unless the policy is not there, nobody else can kind of modify that topic. And regarding people don't have the user set in, we are working on the migration any which way. So as a part of migration, can we just enrich the topic with the user as well? If
Well, the thing is like that. You have a system that is working, regardless of what the AWS documentation says. Your system is working. You have just one user that created all the topics, and you couldn't care less about this, right? This is how your system is working. Now, all of a sudden, you upgrade.
Well, you have to care, because in this system, any S3 user could overwrite any of the topics, right? And that's the wrong behavior.
But I agree. But this is how the system is working, and you're breaking the system for people just because of upgrades. Now, that's going to be so. One thing we may want to do, or we may kind of agree to do, is so the policy is not only about overriding the topic. The policy is also about getting the topic, and even more important, the policy is about publishing to the topic. So the current behavior, which I agree is wrong, this is why Krunal has the fix, but this is how systems are working. The current behavior is that anyone can publish to a topic, regardless of policies. I mean, if you have policies, then it's not going to happen, but we don't require a published policy in order to publish to the topic. So if the argument regarding overriding the topic is going to, nobody really wants other users to override other users' topic. For sure, there are systems when one user created the topic, an admin maybe, and a whole bunch of other users that created the buckets are publishing to the topic. Now, is this wrong? Yeah, it's wrong, but I don't want to break that. And if somebody thinks that this is wrong, then we have the global flag, and they can say that to change the flag from false to true, and then we enforce the correct behavior. But I don't want just an upgrade to enforce the correct behavior and break a whole bunch of systems.
All right, so thanks for pointing out the publish permission thing. That is important, but I would hope that we can separate that from discussions about permission to overwrite things, because I think that's the serious issue that, I mean, you're talking about keeping backward compatibility, but the existing system is broken. I think we need the ability to fix that.
Okay, so one thing we can do is say that, well, first of all, you have to have the user information. Now, I'm not sure how the migration would help with this, how migration would help with the user information, because we have no idea about the identity of the user that originally created the topic.
Yeah,
so I'm not sure how we migrate. So I don't think migration would help here. What we can do is kind of have a an hybrid approach, saying, for the sake of publishing, we don't do the enforcement unless you explicitly created a policy or set the flag to true. We can even keep that maybe for getting the topic, because I don't know, it's less important, I guess. But you can say that for overriding the topic, we're going to risk breaking existing behaviors, because it's really unlikely that somebody really designed a system around different users updating topics that they didn't create.
Right. I agree that migration doesn't help if we don't know the user. And I think that for topics that don't have a user, it's okay to allow overwrites from anybody, but new creates would set the user that did the update, and then only they would have permission to write after that.
Right. Okay, so for the topic create, we would actually ignore the global flag or treat it as true always. So if unless the user, so if the user doesn't exist, then we have nothing to do. If the user does exist, then regardless of the global flag, we're going to check the policy, and the default behavior of the policy is that if there's no policy, then if it's not the same user, then we're going to fail. So that's how the policy works.
Right, but if the topic doesn't have a user set, then we would allow overwrites. It's just if
Right.
user is set and does not match, we would reject.
If user is set, and then we check the policy. Now the policy is, if there's no policy, the only thing that we check is if the user match. If there is policy, then we go and check that.
Okay.
Okay.
So are we? I mean, are we? So we're in agreement on topic creation, the behavior for overwrites.
Yeah, I think so, because
Colonel, does that sound good to you?
I mean, that's what was originally discussed, and yeah, we went ahead with that solution. I mean, we are okay with it as long as there is a way to enforce it. It's more about for people who don't have this, who don't have the user information.
Let's see. Would it make sense to add some kind of Rados GW admin command that would let you set the
User.
user on an existing topic?
So unfortunately for that, the only way I think is the end user itself has to go and again call create user, and that would then store the user if they are onto the new system.
Yeah, you would just recreate the topic, and then you would get the user for whoever recreated the topic.
Yeah. So, but the caveat to that is then whoever calls the create topic, not necessarily originally it was the same user, would now become the user of that topic, the owner of the topic.
Right.
That's a flip side to it, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would at least need release notes. Not sure what we did. Did we add any release notes for the initial config option?
I don't think so, because I mean the original config option is set in a way that doesn't break anything. So nobody needs to change anything, and it will just work for them. This is why it was set in that way. So now that we're making a breaking change, then we must set release notes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So if we're agreed on creation, the ability to overwrite, I'm still curious whether we need the config option, or if we could treat owned topics as defaulting to requiring policy.
No, you have to have the config option because at some point, let's say that the important action are the create topic and the publish action. So at some point,
sorry, just to clarify, I think we allow the publish by default, but other SNS APIs would require policy.
No, okay. So whether we allow or not allow the publish is depending with the global parameter. So if you set the global parameter to true, which means that SNS policies are mandatory, then you have to set it for the publish as well. I mean, if you want a system that doesn't allow any bucket owner to publish to an SNS topic, which is the correct thing, is not to allow, right? Then you want to enforce the publish policy in your system as well. So this is why I think the flag is important.
Okay, I buy that. But could we make the config option only for publish and be strict about all of the SNS APIs?
Yeah. I mean, the get topic, I guess, there's no harm in requiring that only the owner can get their topic.
Right.
Yeah, so we can, so we can use the flag only for the publish, because this would be like too much of a breaking change. And for the create and get and list, I think those are the rest of the actions. Then yeah, we can just ignore the flag and require either a policy or the same user.
And delete as well, right?
Sorry again?
Delete topic.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course, delete topic as well. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I feel like this is much more sane default behavior. But right, it does potentially break things, so we'll have to craft some release notes to correspond to that.
Okay.
So to reiterate, so we will allow, the policy will now only support SNS publish, right? And by default, the get, create, and delete is only can be done by the user, the owner.
Yes. The owner, or if the owner can grant, those actions to anyone if they want.
Oh, okay. So that's what it is right now.
Yeah. This is well, you wrote the code, right? This
Right.
is the PR that you.
No, I thought what Casey was suggesting is we want to be more strict and allow only the owner. That's how I interpreted it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But
So
only in the case where the topic has a user set.
correct. So you also, that's what I'm saying. This is different to what the existing behavior is, right? In the existing behavior, an owner can give permission for somebody else to delete it, to create it, or to do a get. And what Casey is suggesting is we have policies only for publish, and for others, if there is an owner on the topic, only the user should be allowed to do a get.
What? No. So no, this is only with the. This is not what I mean. What's wrong with giving permissions? If somebody wants to give permission, they should be able to do that. I mean, I don't see any issue with this. It's just
Right.
that the default behavior, like the global flag saying whether policies are mandatory, is only for the publish one. For the rest of the things, policies are always mandatory, or in the lack of policy, it has to be the same user.
Right, Kernel, your policy stuff is great. You will be able to grant somebody else access to write your topics.
Okay, cool.
It just won't be required by default for publish specifically.
Okay. So for publish, you don't need to check whether the global flag is on. You always unless there is no policy.
No. You should check the global flag for publish. And if the global flag saying that policies are mandatory, then you shouldn't allow that. But by default, the global flag will be false. So by default, you can publish to whatever topic that you want. And if the admin of the system think that it's not a safe system, they can go and change the flag. But it's not that just, you upgrade to Squid and all of a sudden you can't publish anything.
Right, so I think we would remove any checks for that config option from SNS APIs.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, sounds great to me. If you like, I can craft some text for a release note. I guess, should we create a tracker issue to track the changes that we're going to make?
Maybe use the tracker that the other guy created, and we can even ask them to actually change their PR to be according to what we just discussed.
Good idea.
Yeah.
I'll update that.
I mean, we want more contributors, right?
All right. Sounds like we're in agreement. I did have some, since I'm working on IAM accounts, I have some ideas on how topics will interact with accounts. Essentially, I think that would be a lot closer to what AWS does. Essentially, all topics are namespaced to the account instead of the tenant, so they're not shared between users at all. Sorry,
Okay.
shared between accounts. So by default, only users in an account would be able to even see the topics with the SNS APIs.
Hmm.
And if you wanted to give somebody permission to change yours, you would have to set up a role and let them assume that role. But I think it's pretty easy to have special rules for account users versus normal ones, because we're going to have to keep supporting this these tenant-based topics pretty much indefinitely, since accounts are optional.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is not only for topics. I mean, you would have this duality for pretty much everything, right?
Yeah. Roles is another metadata thing that I've been working through and kind of thinking about topics in the same way. So yeah, I think with accounts, we'll have a kind of more sane way of handling this, but the default behavior in the tenant-based topics, I think, is really important too. So I'm glad that we agree on that part. All right. Anything else on this first topic before we move on? Okay, then let's discuss topic migration.
Yeah.
There's a link to Ellie's PR where we discuss most of that.
Yes. So I think, I mean, at least to me, there are two open issues with the migration. The first one is whether to do the migration on RGW Startup or Realm Reload, or to do the migration as an external tool, like an admin command. And this is first about the topic migration. Let's put the notification migration. This is a different discussion. This is the second open question for me. So I think doing that on the reload or on the restart seems like less exposed to the end user, and therefore probably better. Except the fact that I think, according to what we discussed, I don't think that's going to support getting topics from multiple zones, like the topic object that, like the global topic object that exists per zone. And I thought, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that using an admin command should be possible to kind of collect information from all zones. I mean, I'm not sure how we do the merges, but we can just decide on something and document it, and that should probably be good enough. But my question is, why can't an admin command? I mean, there are admin commands that give you a list of zones. So why can't we write a command that go for each zone and fetch this object from it?
Right. I mean, the RGW period object has all of the zones and their endpoints, so we could send HTTP requests to other zones for migration stuff.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything specific about Rados GW admin's ability to do that versus
Oh,
Rados GW.
so that could be like if we decide to do that in the startup process, we can just do it there.
Right, but I mean, what can you actually do with HTTP requests to do this migration? How would that work?
I mean, you would fetch the object and, using some kind of logic, do a merge with your local object. And, if there are conflicts, I don't know, we don't do that. But if there are topics that were created on some other zone, you just add them. And then you do the migration as we planned before, only that like the master zone now have the information from all the zones.
So would it use like the SNS list topics API to see what's on other zones?
Yeah.
Okay. What about notifications though?
Okay, so this is a different discussion. So initially I thought because notifications are per bucket, then maybe it's not a good idea to do this in a blocking way. So I mean the thing with the topic migration. So during topic migration, we can't create new topics because that would be a problem. So what like initially I thought about a new state, but I think what you suggested, Casey, is that we will have like an implicit state saying that like we're V2 enabled and we still have the global V1 object means that we're in migration state. And as long as we are in this state, we don't allow, like we have specific code in the REST handlers for all the SNS operations. We have like we check that we're in this state and then we just reject with like 4 or 3 or something, like try later. So I don't think that's going to be like the topic migration is going to be pretty quick because it's like you have one small object per zone, and you're going to create an object per topic, and that's it. And this is why I thought there's no issue in like blocking all the topic operation while this is going on. But if you want to now go through all the buckets that you have in the system and check for each and every bucket whether you have a notification or get all the notification objects of the buckets, then that might take a long time. I don't know, if you have a huge system that can take hours, and at least during those hours you can't do anything with creation, like any topic creation or modification or anything. So I thought we should do that lazily. So whenever you think that you need to go, whenever you go and try and get the V1 notification object, or it's also called something like topic something, I don't remember. Anyway, so you go and fetch this object which is per bucket, then you do the migration at that time, and you create the bucket attribute, which means that you don't need to look at that any time later, and you can delete it and everything. And eventually, we would clean up the system. Maybe we'll have some garbage left there if there are buckets that we're never going to touch. But I don't see that as a big issue.
Yeah. So I mean that algorithm sounds okay in a single zone configuration where all requests are on the metadata master so it can migrate things automatically. But in multi-site, I mean, if you're only getting requests on a secondary zone, it might just never do migration.
But the notification migration, I mean, you're setting a bucket attribute. So, I mean, one thing you can do, Well, that would be a bit kind of cumbersome. That you can forward, you can craft a request and forward that to the master, just like you did, just like we do with all the rest of the operations. But the other thing we can do is just set the attribute and then let the bucket mirror sync, let the information go everywhere. Because it's not a global object that we're creating here.
You're talking about the XAdder that we're adding to bucket instance metadata, right? That
Yes,
can still only be written on the metadata master zone if we want all zones to be consistent, right?
Oh, okay, so the other zones won't sync this information?
Other zones sync it, but only if it's written in the metadata master zone.
Oh, okay.
And, I mean, since these notifications would be triggered by just like normal object write requests, we don't want to forward object writes to the master zone.
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting to forward the object rights. I mean, again, I suggest to actually craft a notification creation request to the master zone as if we're a client. I mean, that would really make this operation extremely slow, but that should just happen once per bucket.
What if, so we have no guarantee in multi-site that some bucket foo has the same notification configuration on a secondary zone and a primary zone, right? So it seems like the secondary zone would be trying to write its version of the notification configuration to the master. That's
Right.
probably not what we want to do, since it would overwrite something that was already on the master zone.
Yeah. I mean, when originally somebody created the notifications, they didn't know, like they didn't care which zone is master and which is not. But I agree that it could be we cannot properly document that. I agree. I mean, like if we do the topic migration, we can just document saying, okay, the master zone is the one that takes over others, and if something is missing, we're going to add it, or something like that. We can easily document it, and it would work according to the documentation. But in this case, it'd be quite arbitrary which one is gonna win, because it's going to be dependent with which zone is going to first touch the bucket, or something unpredictable like that.
So I really feel like we should only be trying to do migration stuff on the metadata master. And I feel like we shouldn't do the lazy because of that. The metadata master should migrate all of its own metadata first, and then potentially it could query metadata from other zones and try to merge things in. But I don't know. Is that a strong requirement?
Sorry, which one?
I guess that we migrate metadata on secondary zones in the first place.
Well, I guess we can live with the fact. I mean, we can live with the fact that we're not going to migrate, let's say, the notification information from the other zones. But I mean, if we do the migration lazily, then again, you can have a problem. I mean, if one bucket is actually going to be accessed only from the secondary zone, you're never going to get the you're never going to get the notification configuration for it.
Right. So it would only be the master zone's configuration that is real in this case.
I mean, they would use the V1 version of the configuration. I mean, if this bucket is being accessed only from a secondary zone, then the secondary zone is not going to do the migration, so it's just going to keep on using the V1 configuration. So yeah, I mean, I guess that should work. I mean, our new code should handle both V1 and V2. So
well, I mean, staying on V1 forever isn't a long-term solution. We're going to announce deprecation as soon as V2 is released.
yeah. So maybe maybe in this case we can fetch from the
a fetch from the master zone, not to send it an identification and override it, but actually to fetch it.
I'm sorry. I came to it late. I've heard half of this. I'm not sure why in the case we're talking about now is where an operation on a bucket that you wanted to lazily upgrade is happening on a non-master or non-primary zone. I'm not sure why you can't invent a message or some event that occurs that originates there that is different from overriding what's on the primary zone that triggers some behavior conditionally. It's not required to succeed either. If it succeeded eventually over several events, that would also be fine.
Yuval, are you back?
Yeah. So
Okay. Did you catch all of what Matt said?
yeah. So I think that could be a better approach. So if the secondary zone want to sync up, they would just they can just send a fetch. A fetch could even trigger. A fetch could trigger the migration as well. Like if somebody gets.
Well, like something entirely new. I mean, you mean yeah? I mean, I didn't mean it. I meant something outside the zone of S3 per se. It's a control
Yeah,
message.
I mean, we could just use it because I mean that could be useful for regardless. I mean, let's say that you are now doing a migration, and you have a notification that you didn't migrate for the bucket, and you don't put anything in the bucket, but you get the notification from the bucket. That can trigger the migration as well, and that could be the message that the RGW from the other zone would send.
Yes, I mean the primary zone is in control of what happens, but if it thinks if your logic there knows that it can do something about it and trigger the migration, then you do it.
Yeah.
If not, tough noogie.
Sorry, I don't quite follow. We're talking about a case on a secondary zone, for example, where the secondary zone created a topic and a bucket notification that the master zone doesn't know about?
Oh, no, the master zone should have this notification. So if the notification is only on the secondary, I think we can say this is not going to be migrated. But it could be the notification is on both the secondary and the master, right? And in this case, I mean, the secondary zone just going to get the put object or something first, and as a result,
Well, you're changing. You're doing. There's some event that happens on the primary zone first, anyway, isn't there?
not
Like you,
not
if
necessarily.
you enable the migration. You do the flag day.
Oh yeah,
Right.
but
If the metadata existed on the primary, then it would have already been migrated to V2, and metadata sync would have sunk it to other zones. Maybe not immediately, but eventually.
Yeah, so
that seems good enough. I'm
Yeah,
just
that
worried about
covers everything.
cases where metadata is not consistent between zones. Is it a requirement to migrate things that only exist on other zones?
So hold on. Even in the first case, no,
hold on. I mean, you're in the boss, but I mean, okay. So you haven't this is per bucket metadata, but the fact that you're transitioning to this new situation or this new behavior, isn't that essentially global? There is an intent to do it.
Yes, but what we said is that unlike with the case of topics, when it's just going to happen on startup or on reload on the master, in case of notification, because this is per bucket, we cannot just block everything until we go through all the buckets in the system. So we decided to do that, or I suggest to do that lazily. And if we do that lazily, you have no idea which zone's going to first have any put object to a bucket, right? It could be any of the zones.
But I think Casey's position is talking about like asymmetric replication or something, maybe. Bucket A is only on second on the. I mean,
okay,
it's not on the metadata master, but if they're symmetrical, everything eventually happens. But if not, everything should eventually happen also.
Okay,
right?
I see what Yuval is talking about. I guess I was, I feel like we shouldn't try to do lazy migration, and that's the hard part about triggering lazy migration to happen on the primary when we're getting events on the secondary. I think it's fine. I mean, we can list just the buckets with my notification topics on them and do migration. I don't think it's going to take hours, but even if it does, then we have to block topics because of it.
Okay, so you don't know upfront which buckets have notifications on them. You have to go through all the buckets in the system, and
no.
We could list them.
Right. We have system objects with a specific naming format for the topics, the bucket topic mappings.
Do you have like regex search on system objects?
Yes.
We have prefix searching, which is good enough.
But the bucket is part of the prefix.
Right. So you would use a prefix just up to the bucket name.
Oh, okay.
Or I guess you would have to omit the tenant too if we want to include all tenants.
Okay, I see.
But yeah, just use that topic's OID prefix thing and list all of the system objects we have and run migration on each one.
Okay, so this is fine. So if we don't do the lazy migration, then I don't think there's an issue here. Like I don't see that there's a hard requirement to make sure that we sync the information from all the secondary zones. It's only the lazy migration that was an issue for me here.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like ultimately this will be simpler.
Okay.
So I mean, if we're in agreement on this part, there is still kind of a gap in metadata failover. Like if we do migration on the master zone, but then we fail over to one of the other zones and promote it to master and it still has metadata left over, it would rerun migration and potentially hit conflicts and break. So I'm still not exactly sure how to handle that case. I guess if we built the migration logic to tolerate existing metadata, we could just ignore things, ignore V1 metadata that already exists in V2.
Yeah, that sounds correct.
Okay.
That sounds correct. Okay, so let's go. Sorry, something that we discussed at the beginning. Do we want to ignore completely topics from other zones, or do we want to try and merge them somehow?
Good question. I mean, the migration logic could use SNS list topics to see what exists on other zones and try to fetch things that it doesn't already have. There just wouldn't be a way to do that for buckets.
Right. I'm trying to think. Well, yeah, there probably won't be a way to do that. I mean, you can get notification per bucket, but then you will actually have to go through all the bucket. That doesn't make sense.
Right. If we do try to introduce HTTP requests to this migration path, I mean, that you start having to worry about failure modes, like maybe RGWs are down or an entire zone is down for maintenance. And that might actually prevent migration from happening at all and block topic creation for a long time. So we would want to avoid cases like that. But maybe a best effort to migrate secondary zones is worth a try.
Yeah, or we can say, I mean, again, the big fear is that, you do migration and all of a sudden people are saying, hey, where are my topics? They were gone, deleted. So, I mean, in theory, you even proposed that at some point. You said, you can go to whatever zone that you want, fetch all the topics identifications that you want and write them to the other zone, like in V1, and then do the migration. So we can recommend that. We can even build a tool that does that. And then, depending with how people, maybe they know how they have set up the system, maybe they know that, because the lack of topics synchronization, they did lots of work to make sure that everything is at sync from some of the external applications, and now they say, oh, everything is at sync, but now you're doing the work for us, so it's great. And if somebody would be won't necessarily know, then maybe they can use some external tool to just go and move the configuration from one place to another. I don't even think that this should be a Redis gateway admin command. This could just be like a Python tool that does that. and then they can decide what they do with the error handling, or when they think that they kind of moved all the information that they needed.
I mean, yeah, is this a tool that we would have to build and test for the squid release? I would prefer to avoid having to do that. Do you guys think it's necessary?
I mean, it's either a tool or you have to document a process, right? Because you can't just go and delete people's data without even letting them know. Yeah, because I mean, otherwise, if we try to do like a best effort, then either we get stuck because some zone is down, or we're gonna say, oh, we tried a couple of times, we didn't manage, so we just go on, and then all of a sudden that data is deleted.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not necessarily deleted, but just left in V1 format, even though a V2 of the same thing exists.
Um, I mean, if V2 of the same thing exists, then it's not a big issue. If it's just left at V1 format, then maybe it's not a big issue either. It would just stay there, right? Because let's say that a certain topic doesn't exist in the master; it just exists on some other zone, and this zone was down during the migration. And then when they figure things out and the zone is up again, then it's going to have this topic and those notifications associated with it, and they're just going to use it because we, like in the code, we support, like even if we're in V2, if we don't have the V2 information and we have a V1 information, we just use it. It's just that we're never going to migrate that eventually because the master thinks that everything is done.
Right, but then in 2 releases, when we remove the V1 format, things will break. Earlier we talked about the problems with failover by promoting another zone. But I mean, in cases where the cluster has a lot of metadata that's out of sync, maybe that is the best strategy to get all of it. Just carefully promote each zone to primary to make sure that its topics get migrated.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to put that as a recommendation, though.
Yeah, failover is scary because it can lose data if it's not done correctly.
So I guess we can do the best effort. We can do the best effort in the code, and if some zone wasn't responsive, we can put something in the log and say if migration ended, but it ended with all kind of warnings that some information might not be fetched, then we do recommend to on the maintenance window to do this special operation to sync things up. And you know what? Even if we go back to the idea of a tool, that doesn't have to go with Squid, right? Because we don't delete anything. We can do that later.
Okay. Yeah. If we're like planning to deprecate and remove the V1 format, I want to make that as easy as possible to do eventually. So having to sequence projects like that ahead of it gets difficult, but I agree in principle. Brunel, I assume that you guys are going to have to go through this in your multi-site clusters. Do you have thoughts on this?
We
Are
are
you
probably on
concerned about
the lucky
metadata
side.
inconsistencies between zones?
Fortunately, we are on the lucky side where we don't yet support notifications, so we don't have any topics for migration.
Okay. I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like maybe just documentation saying that before upgrade, if you expect a lot of topics and notifications on non-master zones, then you should manually try to go through and set them on the primary zone before upgrading. And that's kind of painful, and we don't provide a script that does it automatically, but maybe that's the best that we can do reasonably.
Yeah, agree. And again, I mean, the actual deprecation is really, we have a long time until that, and I think we can gather feedback and see what's going on as we progress. And if we feel that we need to build some kind of external tool that does that, then we would do that and make sure that people would use it before the deprecation.
Okay. All right. I think, yeah, we're running low on time for the meeting. I think that's sensible. And I think we made decisions on the 3 points in the agenda to do migration on startup, not to do lazy migration of buckets, and to only run migration on the master with a best effort to list metadata on other zones.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts before we wrap up the meeting? Okay. Thanks so much, Yuval. Thanks,
Okay.
Kunal.
Thanks, guys. That was really helpful.
Thanks, everybody else.
See you. Bye-bye.
See you next time.